You big boys don't cry. So being emotional, bad. Being vulnerable, bad. Being weak, bad. So all of those qualities get put into a pile called not me.
Well, hey, everybody. This is Mike Van Pelt. Welcome to the True Man Podcast. Now, in my experience, and I had to figure this out the hard way, of course, I do my best not to do life on my own, to go get help and to find people who can help me go deeper so that I can not only be my best, but be the best version of myself for my family, my friends, and the men that I serve here at the True Man community. So, how do I do that, you may ask? Well, I get around people who can help me see things that I don't always see myself. And they sometimes help me get unstuck in areas and help me to achieve purpose in my life. So, one of the people I work with now is a special guest on the podcast today. So, welcome to the True Man Podcast, Derek Rydall. Now, Derek is the author of the #1 Amazon and Barnes & Noble best-selling book, Emergence, 7 Steps for Radical Life Change, and the world's #1 expert on the revolutionary law of emergence, which we're going to talk a little bit about today. Now, he works with all kinds of leaders in corporate America and celebrities, and has worked with a number of Oscar and Emmy winners in conscious entertainment. So, Derek, welcome to the True Man Podcast. Just a pleasure to have you here.
It's my honor and pleasure to be here, brother.
You bet. Derek, before we dive too far into everything, and I mentioned this, talk a little bit about the law of emergence for people that may not know what that is. It's really important. So tell everybody, what is it, and maybe how did you get started in this?
Yeah. I mean, I was always on a search for truth in my life, and in my like I guess late 20s or whatever, I was deep into self improvement and all after so many years of self improvement, the only thing I'd really improved was my ability to describe why my life was so screwed up. So
Yeah.
I could tell you, well, when I was 10 or 12 and my dad looked at my report card and said it was all A's and one B, and he's like, "What's with the B, son?" And I could point out all the things and all the reasons why I was so messed up from all the therapy and all the self-improvement
Yeah.
digging and all that. But it wasn't improving my life. I grew more frustrated. I grew more, I was just suffering and struggling more. And eventually it drove me to become addicted to drugs and alcohol. And I almost died of an overdose. And I remember the doctor, I was in the emergency room and IV snaking out of my arms. And he said, "You're lucky to be alive." And I remember thinking, this is what all of my self improvement and all of my efforts got me. Something's missing.
Yeah.
And I decided, I just needed to work harder, work smarter, learn to attract better, something. So I redoubled my efforts. And like whenever you start something afresh, there's a new momentum. And it seemed like I finally had caught it. Things were looking up. And then I was on a film that I was shooting. I was an actor in a film in Jamaica, and everything started going sideways again. And everything was crumbling back at home in Jamaica. And I just praying to get lost from all of it. And I went diving on my own. And I prayed to get, as I said, just to get lost. And I was in this, you know, uh, labyrinthian underwater reef and following all these brightly colored things. And before I knew it, I was literally lost. And I was stuck in what looked like an underwater booby trap tomb out of an Indiana Jones movie. Giant spiked coral all below me that I could barely breathe without getting punctured by. Walls covered in fire coral that was like jelly, 100 jellyfish stings. You couldn't touch it. And I was stuck there underwater. And nobody knew I was out there. And so nobody was coming for me. And I couldn't find the exit. I couldn't turn around without touching the walls, without getting spiked by this coral. I couldn't breathe deeply. And so I'm just in this water, just shallowly breathing with my fingers, keeping myself at a level. And at a certain point, I was praying to get out of there, somehow figure my way out. And at a certain point, I knew I wasn't going to make it out of there. And it's hard to
Mm.
understand the feeling of maybe I hope I'll get out. Please, God, I'll go to church on Sunday. Just get me out of this. And God was not playing Let's Make a Deal that day. And there was a moment where all that was left for me to do was to completely surrender. Again, not like a surrender, like a negotiation, but like I got nothing left. It was getting dark. There were sand sharks swimming below. I was trapped. I was out of time, out of energy. And in that moment of real surrender, of just letting go, there was a flash of awareness. And I saw in an instant that this self, this guy that I've been trying to fix, change, heal, improve, was a fiction of my imagination,
Mm.
was an amalgamation of parental fantasies and peer pressure and societal conditioning. And that there was nothing I could do that would ever make him enough, but that there was another self. And it was just a presence, a sense, an awareness. And this self was already whole and complete. So he didn't need to be improved. In fact, he couldn't be improved. And he had never been damaged. And it was just an awareness. And the next instant, I was standing outside the coral reef on this one little piece of coral that I could stand on that didn't have fire coral, looking in where I'd been stuck for this time. And the exit was just inches behind me the whole time. I just couldn't see it. And I saw the whole reef laid out in front of me, and it was this maze. And I realized it was a metaphor for my life. I'd been swimming through this maze, searching,
Mm.
following all these brightly colored things, already gasping for air, already drowning. And it was just finally in this moment, I was literally experiencing it. But something had radically shifted in that moment of total surrender, unconditional surrender to my idea of God, a higher power, or whatever. In that moment, Humpty Dumpty fell off the wall. Something just shattered. And I was able to swim out the other side of the coral reef, swim away. But the rest of that day, everything had this light. I could see the light shimmering behind everyone and everything. And I had a very profound, deep spiritual opening that night, and it continued. And I ended up pulling out of everything, society, my work as an actor, and I was going to become a monk.
Oh,
And that
wow.
didn't go so well. My monk life. My
That's,
first week
that's
of
quite
being
a transition,
it
right?
was a big transition. I got rid of, I went basically to try it out. And my first week, I was fasting, I was silent. I'd never done anything like that. And I got so free, so hungry, first of all, that I broke into the monk's kitchen in the middle of the night to steal food out of the refrigerator. No joke.
Is that
And
when you get the "you're out of here, buddy"?
and I did, and I went back to my room. I got violently sick, and I had an out of body experience. I never experienced anything like this.
Wow.
And there was these, demons or very angry spirits chasing me, and I basically packed up and ran screaming out of the monastery. But the very next day, or it was actually already morning by the time I was done with that experience. But I ended up cloistering myself in my apartment at the time, and I got rid of everything, news, I was living a monastic life in my apartment in North Hollywood, California. And and what I began to as I began to go deep and understand what happened to me, I am not the same man that went into that coral reef.
Mm.
Something is very different about me. All I want is to know this connection. All I crave and hunger and thirst after is this connection. And as I continue to meditate on this and pray in this space, I basically had this realization that the self I'd seen was like the perfect, in all different religions, we have different names for this.
Yeah.
But I basically saw that just as in every seed in nature, there is a perfect pattern. And that like the acorn is what I use very commonly. The
Mhm.
acorn has the perfect pattern within it of the oak tree. And when the conditions are right, that which is already in it naturally emerges. The acorn doesn't have to attract an oak. It doesn't have to achieve an oak. The acorn is not an inadequate oak tree, right? Just because it's a little crazy little nut doesn't mean it's an inadequate version of something else that it's going to eventually be. It's a perfect acorn with a perfect pattern, and it literally knows how, has the intelligence and the wisdom to activate the atomic structures in the quantum field and everything and turn it into an oak tree. And every seed in nature does the same thing. And the same thing is true with us, that there is a seed of purpose and a divine plan that is planted in the soil of our soul.
Mm.
And when we come into alignment with it, when we create the right conditions, the conditions that are congruent with our soul's seed, our soul's pattern, then it naturally emerges. Now, what I also realized was that most of my efforts and most of our human efforts to attract and achieve and to fix and to make happen is all of the resistance that we are putting up against the natural unfoldment. It's all of the mindset and the beliefs and everything that basically say, I'm broken, I'm not enough, I don't have enough yet. I'll be enough when, and all of that is basically a belief that says that has to be, we have to experience, as Jesus said, it is done unto you as you believe. So we don't experience life as it is, we experience life as we are through the filters of our beliefs and perceptions. But when we start to become congruent with the truth that the whole thing is already within us,
Yeah.
again, the kingdom of heaven is within. That's, if we only got that piece right, we would be in a very different place. So that was the basic understanding, that life is not happening to us, but that it's happening through us and as us. And what we have to begin to do is to organize our life inside and out as if we already have it, we already are it, not as a trick to attract it, but as the truth, so that we can come into alignment with it. And that's what I ended up coining the law of emergence. And it was right around the time when law of attraction was very popular.
Yeah.
So it was I used to do a talk called the unattractive side of the law of attraction. And basically, and it was talking about all this effort to make stuff happen to us was creating many of the blockages to the natural unfoldment or emergence of it.
So awesome. Why do we, and I'm, uh, when I say why do we, I'm talking about me too, right? Because I'm human as anybody else. Why do we allow this stuff to happen to us?
Like what stuff? What stuff?
Well, I mean, many of us go through life and experience the school of hard knocks,
Yeah.
and we try to do it the hard way. We try to control everything. I see where Derek's going here. He's like, Mike, get vulnerable. Let's really dig in here, right? So, I'll use me as an example since I get to play guinea pig on the show all the time. I think there's this lack of vulnerability that a lot of us want to live with because, we're trying to be something that we're not, right? We wear the mask, we pose. In my sales and marketing career over the years, they would say things like, fake it till you make it, which is
Right.
really an awful saying. Feels like, there's just a lot of people running around trying to be something that they're not. We're fighting it instead of, you
Well,
know,
I think that's part the I think the fundamental first reason why that is the case is what I experienced in that coral reef moment, where I saw that I had spent my whole life trying to fix, change, heal, and
yeah,
improve this what is essentially a false self. It's a self that is made out of man's idea of the self, right? This is the fundamental meaning behind the Garden of Eden and the
mm,
belief in good and evil and the creation of the false self. Man eats of the knowledge of good and evil takes on the role of judge and falls into history. What is that? Falls into his story. And now we're stuck in a story about man, a story about life. And if you actually look close to Genesis, the story, there's two Genesis versions. One is God's creation, and the next one is man's creation.
Right.
And so God made it all and named it good, and it's perfect. And again, whatever, I mean, I think your people are fine with me talking about God openly and not
Oh yeah.
veiling it in different words, but there's a perfect pattern of life. The word, the logos, is the perfect self, the perfect life. And then what happens is we begin to perceive our sense of separation in form, in bodies, and we develop the Tower of Babel, our idea of
Yeah.
we can become gods, we can reach to heaven, we can control earth, we can conquer it, harness it, all of that. And we built this whole false notion of who and what we are as humans. And the truth, which I saw in that moment and have continued to see, is that I of myself am nothing, that I am but a branch of the tree. And when I believe I'm something of myself, I'm the branch cut off from the tree that withers and dies. I'm the prodigal son that has taken my inheritance and said, "Thanks, Dad," and gone off and tried to make a life of my own, only
Yeah.
to finally call up Dad when I'm sitting there with prostitutes and pigs and like, "Can I come back, please?" So that's the journey of all of us. And that was my experience in that moment as I realized this self that I spent my whole life trying to make something. It wasn't my job to make something of myself. It was my job to become devoted and a servant of the self, of the plan, of the idea that was already made. To become like a gardener. A gardener doesn't go into a garden and have the hubris and the arrogance to think he is going to make a tree. They have the humility and the love and the devotion to serve the seed and the soil
Mm.
and to create the conditions for that which life or God has already made to emerge. So that's the flip that we all have to make. And we can make it through a spiritual journey, or we often have to make it through crises and tragedies that bring us to our knees and slap us around the face like Job and make us realize that we don't have a freaking clue actually what's going on. We are all blind men holding different parts of the elephant. And so that's the first step is the recognition that we need to replace the John Wayne swagger with the Dalai Lama smile, as one of my mentors, Michael Beckwith, used to say, or the loving embrace of Jesus. Whatever it is, there's a different, vulnerable, humble space, and it scares the heck out of
Oh
people,
man.
especially men or people that have a high masculine, because there's women with very masculine personalities and they can have the same experience. But it scares us because we've been conditioned to believe that what makes us a man is our ability to conquer and control
Yeah.
and to forge iron into the implements of life and all that stuff. And we believe that if we really surrender, if we really let go of control and let go of the arrogance that we know the answer, that we'll fall apart, that we'll become impotent, that we'll have no power, that the world will take advantage of us, that the world will come crumbling down, that we're Atlas holding the world on our back. And I understand that. I've
Yeah.
gone through that journey, and there's deep shame and deep pain and deep fear inside all of us because on a deep level we know we're powerless and we
Mm.
know we are trying to compensate for that. But I can tell you, when you are willing to be humble enough to admit that, and then a servant of this deeper potential or purpose or seed within you, not to make yourself something, but to be an instrument of something bigger than yourself, then that's when the real healing and the real transformation, and I dare say the real
Mm.
power begins to move and flow through you.
Beautiful. And part of the reason that we have the opportunity to talk today is a few weeks ago, I had a question in your group. And one of the things that, talking about surrendering, right? We all have some stuff in our life, baggage, things that have gone on that make us us, in a lot of ways. And sometimes that's good, and sometimes that's not bad. So, in reflection, as for me, how can I be a better coach? How can I reach my audience better? The best way for me to do that is self discovery of me. And one of the things that I've had to recognize that probably not one of my better attributes sometimes is this idea of having strong opinions that may be a little overbearing and hard judgments about things because, well, I don't see it that way. So that can't be right, And
Yes.
that's not a great way to live. And so we kind of got into this whole area of judgment. And I think it's become keenly aware to me, especially over the last, 3 or 4 years, and let's just call it during our little COVID period here, became keenly aware that I wasn't the only one carrying this around because it sure seemed like as I was flipping on the television, which I've had to watch less and less and less of, is I'm not the only one carrying around judgment and strong opinions. In fact, it sure looks to me like a lot of people are shouting at each other these days. And
Yes.
and so let's kind of dive into this area of judgment. And I'm going to say most specifically around the judgment and strong opinions that men carry around that can get in the way of them being the men they're really called to be.
Yes. Yeah. Now there's different kinds of understandings of judgment. There is righteous judgment,
Mhm.
and righteous judgment is like what a judge does, basically. And what it, but what it, but in the spiritual terms, it means there are principles. Like for example, let's put it in a practical way. If I'm an electrician and I'm trying to wire a house or fix a wiring situation, I'm going to use righteous judgment, meaning I'm going to use the laws of electroconductivity and the principles of proper construction, all these things. I'm going to look to to that doctrine, as it were, to determine how to wire and to repair and to make
Mhm.
this the safest, right? And then the same thing in America with the Constitution and the Supreme Court and judges. They're looking to laws as best as we have come up with them as individuals. And then spiritually, we're looking to the spiritual laws. And so righteous judgment is not you're bad or you're wrong. It's looking at what's the principle, what's the spiritual principle, the universal principle, the natural principle, and and that becomes a judge against the way I'm living. And in the sense that I want to bring myself into alignment with that. So that's proper judgment. That's righteous judgment. And then there's discernment, which is which is a version of judgment, which
Mhm.
is it's like be wise as a serpent, but gentle as a dove. It's, you know, somebody might be, the truth of them is that they are the child of God, that they are a unique expression of life, and that they are ultimately and innately innocent beings who have been corrupted and conditioned by human experiences and beliefs. And you want to see that about them as a person, as a righteous person of righteous judgment. You want to see and discern the truth about them. However, if they are living out from a deluded, distorted, or egoistic or
Yeah.
hubristic state of mind, you also want to be discerning if you're about to get into a relationship with them,
Mhm.
right? Being spiritual or loving doesn't mean you lose your faculty of discernment. All people are children of God. Well, yes, but that person doesn't know that, and they're going to hurt you. That's discernment. That's not negative judgment, right? So there's different kinds. There's righteous judgment, there's discernment, there's understanding laws and principles and discerning and aligning yourself and attempting to bring things into alignment with that. You have a vision for your life, right? Or a vision for your company. and it's a beautiful vision and it's a good vision. Well, that vision is a judge. It's always looking at you and you're always being judged compared to where that goal or that vision is. That's a good thing. As long as you're not beating yourself up, you're like, oh yeah, I'm off, right? Right. I mean, the word sin is an archery term. It means to miss the mark. It's like you shot and you missed. So that's a judgment. The saying you sinned is not you're bad, it's you miss, or you have the wrong target to begin with, or you have too many targets. And so you're shooting arrows everywhere. That's judgment in its righteous or right use. But there's another kind of judgment. So it's very important because I want to give people the security to know you're not going to let go of discernment. You're not going to let go of righteous judgment, of the ability to align yourself to higher order and higher principles. And if you're a parent, to help your children do the same, you're not going to suddenly just become overly relativistic and say everything's relative and nothing matters. No, that is not the truth spiritually, as it says, be hot or be cold, but if you are lukewarm, I will spew you from my mouth, saith the Lord. You do have a point of view, but here's the difference. Your point of view and your opinion, when the Supreme Courts render an opinion, it's not opinion based on your puny little narrow myopic human experience, right? That's not the opinion that matters.
Some people don't want to hear that though.
I know, right? But it's an opinion and a point of view based on principle as best as you can see it, right? Yeah. So you have to have a point of view. Life is not neutral, right? Life is not neutral. That principle of the law of emergence in the soil that's going to grow that acorn into an oak tree is not neutral. It's very specific. And so I want to be very clear. You will not be weak. You will not be powerless. You will not lack direction. You will not lack the ability to discern. Okay, but then there is another kind of judgment. And this is the judgment that is actually a form of protection, a form of survival, a form of control around your myopic ego map of reality and identity. So what happens is, as you're growing up and evolving, we all recapitulate the fall from Eden, the fall from grace experience. We start out as children and there's no sense of separation. We actually believe we're one with life, with mommy, and then at a certain point we start to separate. We fall into history. And what happens is we delineate, I'm a separate being based on experiences. We map out our reality. We develop an identity. And then we have what's called a core wound, where we have to begin to believe something less than true about ourselves in order to fit in and survive. All of that's part of the journey of developing as a human being. But what happens is we do the same thing. We eat of the knowledge of good and evil, and we start to judge.
Yeah.
Based on our experiences from mom, dad, teachers. Oh, maybe I want to speak up, and I hear the message, children are meant to be seen and not heard, or whatever. Or I get told, you're stupid, you're wrong. And so I believe that this part of me that has a desire to speak up, this passionate part of me is wrong, is stupid. And so it's dangerous to keep expressing it. So I need to repress it. I need to judge it. Stupid, wrong, inadequate, unworthy, unlovable, etc. Weak. You big boys don't cry. So being emotional, bad. Being vulnerable, bad. Being weak, bad. So all of those qualities get put into a pile called not me. Not okay to be that. Weak, vulnerable, sissy, wimp, stupid, inadequate, whatever, right?
Yeah.
Now we also get a pile of those qualities, we won't go into right now, of the positive stuff that also is not us, and that's called the light shadow. But it all goes into the pile of I am not. And then we have to compensate for that. If I can't be weak, I have to be strong. So I take on the identity and the strategy of getting strong. If I can't be inadequate, I have to become perfect, or I have to become good or great. So I
Yeah.
take on the strategy of, I'm going to improve myself and get better grades and show daddy that I'm a strong man, or show mommy that I'm a good man, or whatever. If I can't be bad, I have to be good. So now I'm going to put bad aside and take on the mantle of good. So there's the shadow. Eventually, this becomes two piles: I am not and I am. The I am not becomes the shadow, the I am becomes our ego. And then we go on our life trying to continue to double down on all the stuff that I am, but all the while using all the energy that is needed to repress and
Yeah.
sublimate the pile of I am not. But here's the problem psychologically and even metaphysically: you cannot, energy is never destroyed. So all those judgments that are bad, wrong, scary, all those qualities, they don't go away. They're still in you.
Yeah.
But now they get projected out on the screen of your experience. And they show up as the people that push all your buttons and trigger you and make you point your fingers and all that stuff. But that's you're seeing. Those are all your sublimated, rejected, denied, and judged human qualities,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then what happens is we don't realize that's happening. So we get into relationships, our spouses, our family, our friends, our enemies, and we're all just shadow dancing. We're no longer in relationship with each other. We're in relationships with our fictional characters. As Michael Beckwith calls, it becomes the friction of the fictions. It's just all these fictional characters battling it out, which is also why Shakespeare said all the world is a stage and men and women are but players upon it, right? But that's the judgment we have to be aware of. That's the part where we are righteous in a destructive way, where we are pointing fingers, where we are triggered. And you can always tell because there's a constriction to it. It could be anger, it could be, but there's a sense of constriction
Yeah.
when we're judging from that place. But the opportunity, as we spoke about, is if we can, instead of when we're getting triggered thinking that's a bad thing, and trying to do whatever we can to stop that pain and that bad feeling from going away, we become trigger happy. And we actually acknowledge that that trigger of my spouse, my kid, my mom, my dad, my friend, the enemy, the politician, that trigger is an evolutionary signal showing me a part of myself that I need to love and understand. As Jesus said, you must love your enemy. And as many times as it takes, 70 times 7, which basically means as long as you have to. And then he said, where did he say the enemy is? In your own household. Household metaphysically means your mind,
Yeah.
right? So when we love those parts of ourselves that we're seeing out there, when we find all the weak, the vulnerable, the stupid, the inadequate, the unworthy, the needy, the greedy, the ugly, the whatever, the arrogant, the bully, all those parts of us, as we love them, as we seek to understand them, as we seek to understand the true need at the heart of that judgment, at that shadow part of us, what happens is it is redeemed. That, the word evil is just live backwards. And literally, the word devil is just lived backwards. And so when you embrace the enemy, the evil, it inverts. It becomes more life. It becomes life affirming. You discover there's a gift at the heart of every one of those qualities you have judged. And then guess what? You become empowered. You
Mm.
discover latent gifts, talents, and abilities. All the energy you've been using to control and fight and push and hide, you now have available to
Mm.
create. And all those people, you suddenly now see the truth about them, and they begin to transform in your presence. You become the light of the world instead of the dark. All the judgment is ignorance. All the judgment is darkness. It's the lack of light. And now more and more light can move through you because you aren't filled with all these pockets of darkness, of ignorance, of judgment. Where you judge, you are blind. When you embrace it is when you see. And you not only see yourself, but you see others. And the sight of God is able to move through you. And again, that's when you become a truly beneficial presence.
That was a lot of wisdom right there. And I got to say, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work to see these things. This whole area of judgment and having strong opinions is something that I continue to work through. But the beauty, I think, is unfortunately, I find a lot of people they never get to the point where they even have the awareness of it,
Correct.
unfortunately. And that's kind of the initial piece of it. And even one of my favorite words is redeemed. So you were just cruising along and then you threw it in, and I just felt my heart go, oh, that felt good. Like I needed to hear that in that moment because this is really deep and difficult
Yeah.
material to trudge through, and a lot of us have built this up, over time. I mean, personally,
All of us.
yeah, well, all of us. I know I've used judgment as some kind of insulator to like, well, I don't want somebody to know that I'm not, you know,
Totally.
what, and I think it started at a very young age. A chapter that I wrote, in a collaboration book, The Power of Asking for Help, and really part of that was at a young age getting glasses and having people go, "Well, you must be smart, you got glasses," and so you stop asking questions, right?
Yeah.
And when you stop asking questions, you really what I found what happened to me was I started making judgments,
Yeah.
like, "Well, I don't wanna know." The truth is my truth,
Yeah.
not your truth.
I mean, you're
And
saying something very important there. I mean, I joke, the reason kids are young and healthy and happy and adults are old and sick and miserable is kids only have questions and adults only have answers.
yeah,
And so
it's really true.
and so the and it's true that, and again, we talk about the blind men and the elephant analogy. You probably know that, but they're all feeling different parts of the elephant. And one says it's a tree trunk. One says no, it's a rope. The other one says no, it's a stump. Whatever they have, it's a leather pack. Whatever they have, all these different perspectives, and they're certain from their limited perspective that they know what it is, but they're all blind. And so again, the first thing we have to acknowledge is that we are blind,
Yeah,
right? This is true metaphysically. This is true in terms of physics. This is true in terms of neurobiologically. Uh, like this is not woo woo even to say, even though there's a spiritual dimension to which it's true. We talk about having blind spots as if like when you're driving, that one
yeah,
little
yep,
area you can't
yep.
see, but you think you basically see. No, it's exactly the other way around. Everything in truth is inverted based on whatever you think is humanly true, just invert it. And that's going to be closer to the spiritual truth. We don't have blind spots. We live almost entirely in a blind spot, and we have little slivers of seeing. That's more accurate. And when you get that, it's scary at first because you think you're the one in control. Again, it's the illusion,
Right.
right? You think you're the one. So if I don't see, I'm in danger. No. What did Luke Skywalker have to learn from Obi-Wan Kenobi? Trust the Force, Luke. Let go of your willful idea that you're the one in charge. Move away the technology. Let go of your visual sensory apparatus. Live not by eyesight, but by insight. That's where the real power comes. That's where the real wisdom flows. That's where you become the channel of the omniscience of the divine instead of your puny little 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 80 years of absolutely almost no knowledge, right? Even if you knew all that was to be known, it's still a one drop in all the oceans of the world. And so, and that's always going to be true because what is knowable is infinite. And so, and then what happens eventually is you do become empty. you do become nothing of yourself. But in the space of the nothing and the empty and the silence comes the thunder of truth and power, right? Instead of trying to grasp the river in your hands and getting only a few drops, you surrender and rest in it and get the whole ocean rushing over you and through you. So that's, and again, that's what Jesus was teaching. They're praising him, and he's like, why do you call me good? There's none good but God. I myself can do nothing. If I take credit for this message, I'm lying. He's like, none of this has anything to do with me. Why do you keep making it about me? Right? He's like, there is a power, there is a presence, there is a father, there is a divine, whatever metaphor version you want to use. That's what's in control. The life that created all of nature, that created you. It's like, it's like we wake up in the morning, we're like, thanks God, I'll take it from here. It's like, no, that's the prodigal again. And then what follows is you have to be the judge. And then you have to judge everything. And that's the whole reason we fall into his story, into history, is because what is a story? It's made up of all the judgments. It's made up of the battle of good and evil. It's made up of this idea of a separate self battling against all these opposing forces. Well, in truth, in reality, there are no opposing forces. If you believe in God and you believe in an opposing force, you're an atheist, because
Yeah.
God is not God if God has an opposing force. Whether you want to call it the devil or whatever, if that's a power other than God, then there is no God. And so this one life, this one power, this one mind, this one presence, this one whatever you want to call it, take it from science, this one quantum field, it's indivisible. And you are a unique emanation, expression, unfoldment of it, but you're not the one in charge. But you do have a role, and your value and your role and the right alignment as an individual, man, woman, whatever, is to be receptive. Instead
Yeah.
of, do not try to save your life, but instead serve the life that is seeking to emerge. Be devoted to, as we talked about, that deeper pattern or purpose or higher pattern or purpose, and practice letting go of one judgment every week, one opinion every week, and watch what reveals itself in place of that. Because again, remember the judgment, remember I talked about earlier, you map out reality and your identity as
Yeah.
you maturate in your first 3 to 7 years. You map it out. And then as you move through life, every place of judgment is a place outside of your conscious map of reality. So if you're willing to embrace that judgment and get curious again, be ye as a child to
Yeah.
enter the kingdom. Be a child again. Be curious. Be in the question. The question is the question. Be in the question again. What you'll discover is there's a whole new patch of territory available to you when you let go of the judgment. The judgment is just protection. You're just on the edge of your map. Get curious again. Go on the quest again. All the buried treasure that you need to fuel and fund your life, it's on the other side of all those judgments. It's out there in the wilderness you haven't mapped out yet. It's not in the world you've already mapped out. That's not where
Yeah.
the buried treasure is. All the treasure is out there outside the castle walls, out there beyond all your opinions. As Rumi says, out beyond right and wrong, there is a field. I'll meet you there.
Yeah, and that's therein lies where the beautiful story is, and that's what I try to talk with people about is that you have a beautiful story. You're a part of the larger story,
Yeah.
right? And you don't have to live in the story where it's at right now unless you want to live there, or you can take action and you know
If it's working for you, but where it's not, where you feel stuck, where you're struggling, where you're holding back, where you're hiding, where you're playing it safe, there is a judgment in there
Mm.
and a fear in there about some part of you. And when like I said, when I began to work with my judgments, as I call them, the shadows, I mean, I didn't create that. That started with Carl Jung,
Yeah.
and maybe even sooner. But like, for example, you talked about the people believing you were smart, but deep down, you had a shadow around believing you were stupid or inadequate and couldn't
Yeah.
live up to that. So you begin to create protections against them discovering you're a fraud, that you're not
Yeah.
the smart guy that they think you are. And then yeah, create judgments, because when you are righteous in the destructive sense, that's always a protection against the deep down belief that you actually don't know, that you're actually a fraud, that you're a fake. When you said fake it till you make it, the word fake had a sting to you. That's another shadow. When you embrace the fake, the fraud, and the stupid, you don't become fake, fraud, and stupid. Faking, when it's embodied, another word for that is pretending. That is pretense. Before it is practice. It's how children learn. Monkey see, monkey do. So faking, pretending is not a bad thing. It's a necessary thing, right? We call it mentorship. We call it apprenticeship. It's all the same thing. If you're not able, we might call it faith, but faith without works is dead. So
Hmm.
when you're acting on your faith, you're faking it, you're pretending, you're practicing living in accordance with a higher potential. And only by practicing it before it is there, before you are there, can you activate it and embody it and integrate it. So that's an example of taking what
Mm.
appears to be a negative, faking, pretending, but when you embrace it, it actually gives you the power of divine pretending, of being able to practice being your best self, even though that will mean you're going to stumble and fall. Babies can only learn to walk by falling a lot. You can only succeed by failing a lot. You are the product of billions of failures of evolution, right? It's been all a bunch of failures, just one failed experiment after another, one botched experiment after another. You're the product of that. But if we have a judgment of faking, pretending, being stupid, being inadequate, being unworthy, and we can't embrace our stupid, fake, unworthy, inadequate self, we're not going to be able to get up off of all fours and learn to walk, and then learn to run,
Yeah.
and then learn to fly. So that's an example of how when you take the judgment or take the shadow and learn to embrace it, it gets transmuted and it gets to be on your team, right? Whatever the shadow is, no matter what. And we won't go through all of them today. I mean, I do have a shadow program people can check out and a free shadow audio on my website in the free training section where they can walk through and I guide you through a shadow process, because we're not really talking about the specifics of how to work with this judgment or shadow, but that audio will walk them through that guided meditation to help them work with it, because there is a specific way to
Yeah.
meet these. But to begin with, you can just start to notice, where are you triggered? What do you protest? Thou doth protesteth too much, right? He was talking about shadows and judgment,
Yeah.
right? Where are you protesting? Where are you defensive? Where are you protective? What are you afraid for somebody to find out about you? What is your self-talk beating you up say about you? What are you afraid others are going to think about you? Just start writing all those down. And again, if you see people out there that trigger you, if you were to be totally raw and unspiritual and just totally judgmental, what would you call them? Oh, they're such a stupid, crazy idiot, blah, blah, blah. Just write it all down. Just
Right.
vent that. And then those all underline all of the qualities that are judgment. Stupid, idiot, fool, unconscious, evil, bad, needy, greedy, sad, mad. Just notice all those. And then just start with the one that has the strongest charge. But just know that all of those things you just wrote down are all you. Those are all in you. But the good news is they're all beautiful qualities of your whole and complete self when they are redeemed. When you love the enemy in your own household, it is redeemed, and all of these bad qualities become a greater paint set, a greater palette, a full range keyboard to play the music of your heart and paint the pictures of your soul. And you become a great artist of your life. But not until you embrace more of those parts of you. So they can definitely check that audio out.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Derek, as we begin to wrap up today, tell everybody how they can get a hold of you, your website and all that. And we'll, of course, put that in the show notes, but how can everybody get a hold of you and get in touch with, with your courses, with your audios and your books? And
absolutely. Yeah. DerekRydall.com, DerekRydall.com. And if you go to the free section there's lots of free trainings. And down at the bottom, I believe there's a guided shadow training. If for whatever reason you guys can't find it, you can just email support@DerekRydall.com and they'll direct you to the right link. So that's certainly a place to go. Check out the site. There's a lot there. Also, you'll see my podcast there. And I have a podcast as well called Emergence. And, lots and lots of podcasts where I'm teaching and training on these different topics in depth. And then my books, you can see them on my website as well. Emergence is there. You can also get it obviously on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, whatever. And also The Abundance Project, which is another one of my books. But you'll find everything on the Derek Rydall website.
Derek, it was so awesome having you on today. I was listening to you tell the Star Wars story, and I'm like, man, we need to have him back on and talk about how Hollywood creates faith-based movies that they don't even know they're creating. I think we should do one on that. That would be fun.
I am a screenwriter and a fiction writer, and I was an actor. And
well, Derek, you know this. Not everybody in Hollywood does, right?
Yeah.
That's right. They don't know they're making these faith-based movies sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of that going on. They're basically parables. If Jesus was alive today, he might be a Hollywood producer or something, and he's just basically spewing out parables that are transforming the world.
I like to think Jesus would be walking the red carpet wherever he went. That's how I like to think about it.
That's right.
Derek, it was so wonderful having you on. Thanks for being on the True Man podcast.
It's my pleasure, man.
You bet.